Every day the same sound returns. A low mechanical buzzing, endless static, a signal echoing through the radio spectrum without interruption. For decades, it has continued broadcasting somewhere inside Russia. Nobody officially claimed it, nobody explained it, and somehow it never completely disappeared. People eventually gave it a name. UV-B76, the buzzer. But the unsettling part was never the sound itself. It was the fact that the signal did not behave like ordinary radio interference. Because sometimes voices appear, fragments of names, strings of numbers, short-coded phrases spoken without explanation. And over time, some people began believing the station was still active for a reason, still transmitting, still waiting. The problem is, nobody knows who the signal is actually meant for. The signal first attracted attention during the Cold War. Shortwave radio listeners across Europe began noticing something unusual on a single frequency, 4,625 kilohertz, always the same signal, always the same buzzing sound, low, mechanical, like heavy machinery running somewhere inside an empty building. At first, most people assumed it was simply a military transmission, but the years passed and the signal never stopped. Day after day, year after year, the station continued broadcasting. And what made it stranger was the strength of the transmission itself. The signal could be heard across multiple countries, far stronger than most civilian broadcasts could reasonably explain. But no station identification was ever given, no organization claimed ownership, and no official explanation was ever provided. Radio enthusiasts eventually gave the station a nickname, the buzzer, because the sound never seemed to end. And over time, people slowly realized something unsettling. This was not random interference. Someone was intentionally keeping the signal alive. Eventually, radio hobbyists began trying to locate the source, and after years of tracking, attention focused on a remote region outside Moscow, a forest area surrounded by abandoned military facilities. Several explorers attempted to enter the location, and during those visits, they reportedly discovered an unusual building, an old transmission facility. Inside, faded military markings still covered the walls. Loose wires lay scattered across the floor. But the strangest part was not the equipment. It was the signs that someone had been there recently. Cigarettes had been left behind. Old cups still sat on the desks. Numbers were written across the walls like hurried notes, as if the station had only recently been abandoned. Then someone noticed a sentence written on one wall. The broadcast does not stop, but according to official records, the facility was no longer active. Most of the power systems barely functioned. And yet, the signal continued broadcasting. That was the moment people began asking a far more uncomfortable question. If the facility was abandoned, then where exactly was the signal coming from now? The deeper people searched, the stranger the mystery became. The region connected to the signal was filled with remnants of old Soviet infrastructure, decaying buildings, collapsed towers, silent roads disappearing into forests. Some explorers described the area as feeling less like an abandoned military base and more like a place that had been left behind in a hurry. Inside one structure, old radio equipment was still connected. Dust covered everything, but strangely, certain objects looked untouched. fresh footprints were reportedly seen during some visits. Doors appeared moved, and once, listeners monitoring the station heard background sounds that resembled voices inside a room. Not pre-recorded, not distorted, real, as if someone was still operating the system from somewhere nearby. And suddenly, the mystery no longer felt like an old Cold War relic. It felt active, present, like something was still running quietly in the dark. Intelligence analysts say UVB-76 may not be a myth at all. During the Cold War, many governments used what were known as number stations, shortwave broadcasts designed to send coded messages to intelligence agents. The process was simple. A voice would read specific words or numbers. Field operatives would then decode the message using cipher sheets. But the unsettling part is this. Even after the Cold War ended, some of those stations never disappeared. And many researchers believe UVB-76 could be one of them. But there is a problem with that explanation. Most number stations broadcast only at scheduled times. UVB-76 is different. The signal remains active almost constantly, hour after hour, day after day. And that led some experts to a disturbing possibility. Maybe the message itself is not the important part. Maybe what matters is simply that the signal exists. And if the signal were ever to stop completely, that silence itself might mean something has happened, something serious. And that possibility is exactly why people became afraid of it. In 2022, listeners noticed something unusual. The buzzing stopped. After decades of constant transmission, the signal suddenly vanished, only for a few minutes. But those few minutes were enough to send panic through online radio communities. People immediately began recording, listening, waiting. And within the silence, strange sounds emerged. Distant movement, metallic noises, muffled voices speaking in Russian. Then suddenly the buzzing returned, as if nothing had happened. But after that incident, people stopped treating the station like a harmless curiosity, because the signal no longer felt automated. It felt monitored, maintained, controlled by someone listening, someone waiting. Someone capable of sending messages whenever necessary. The problem was nobody knew who. And after the interruption, the station simply continued, buzzing endlessly through the darkness once again. Even now, thousands of UVB-76 recordings exist online, and some contain sounds that are difficult to explain. In one recording, listeners claimed they could hear what sounded like a woman screaming faintly in the background. Another seemed to capture hurried footsteps, heavy breathing, objects moving suddenly inside a room. Some listeners even reported strange experiences after monitoring the station for long periods, recurring dreams, mechanical buzzing heard late at night, and the same numbers appearing repeatedly inside their thoughts. Most likely, many of these stories are exaggerations, internet folklore. But one fact remains undeniable. The broadcast itself is real, not a legend, not a fictional horror story. Right now, somewhere inside Russia, that signal is still transmitting. And somewhere else, someone is still listening. To this day, the true purpose of UVB-76 has never been confirmed. Some believe it belongs to the Russian military. Others think it may be connected to a nuclear retaliation system. Another theory claims it simply exists to maintain an active communication channel. But none of those explanations fully answer the questions. Why has it continued for decades? Why do human voices occasionally appear? Why were abandoned facilities linked to the signal? And why has no official explanation ever been given? But perhaps the most unsettling part is something deeper. Most people believe every system in the world is controlled. Every signal has a purpose. Every broadcast has an operator. But UVB-76 creates a strange fracture in that belief. A transmission with no confirmed owner. A signal with no confirmed purpose. And even now the buzzing continues, as if somewhere beneath the surface of the modern world, something unfinished is still operating, still waiting, still alive. Even today, the broadcast continues. The same buzzing sound, the same frequency, and occasionally voices with no clear meaning. People still search for answers. Who operates the station? Why it exists? Why it never stops? But after decades, nothing has been fully explained. Maybe the signal is a message meant for someone. Or maybe it is simply proof that a hidden system is still alive. But one fact remains certain. Right now, somewhere inside Russia, that mechanical buzzing is still echoing across the airwaves. The question is, who exactly is supposed to hear it? And why, after all these years, it is still waiting?
This story ends here. But in the darkness, stories remain. Will you stay for the next one? Dark Case Hub.